Hello and welcome to AdWords Bootcamp session number 5. And we are diving into a little bit of slightly deeper and more expansive material here because the theme is quality score and a little bit about landing pages, not a huge amount, but a little bit about landing pages. And then the second half of what Mike is going to be talking about is Google Shopping and all the things related to merchanting and so on. So Mike, great to have you on. Just as a bit of
Great to have you back.
yeah, as I know it, and I wasn't able to be on the last one, and I missed that terribly. So I recall personally the idea of quality score first showing up. I want to say in about summer of August of 2005, maybe.
Spot on. Yeah.
Because Google suddenly started taking all kinds of things into account and giving you a rating based on how good your ads were or were not, and so on. And it was a brand new concept back then, and then it became a big deal and got a little complicated very quickly. So
Yes.
eager to hear you kind of demystify that for us,
That
because
is the aim.
it used to
I
be
will
simple.
try. It used to be simple. For me, it's the whole game.
Mhm.
Understanding quality score and why quality score exists, what Google are trying to do by having that, understanding how to play the game from Google's point of view,
Mhm.
uh, really is the key. So we're going to look at, well, there's your mind map, as always, and we're going to dive into the different types of scores, how they're calculated, the weight of those different factors, and then a little checklist of things that you can do to fix quality score. So,
It is funny,
yeah,
one of
what
the
is
notes
it?
on the mind map was disaster management. Because for some people that does happen, but you're right. Quality score is the center of how Google decides everything about you.
It really is, and simply put, it is this, which is a phrase I will steal from the venerable Brad Geddes. It is an automated opinion. It's what Google, the machine, thinks is going to happen with a particular part of your account. And as we go, I'll dig into the different types of scores. But essentially, that's what Google's trying to do. It's trying to keep these three groups of people happy, as we've talked about in the past. At the peak of the triangle at the top there, the users first and foremost. Google are a customer-centric organization. They want to look after the customers first. They want the experience of using Google to be the best it can be, because they know by doing that, us advertisers are going to come back and spend more money, which keeps Google's market share very healthy, which keeps their stock holders healthy. What is quality score? Well, I think it's these three things. Some people call this a VIP program or a preferred customer program. Here in Australia, we call it mates rates. So it is the only media in the world for me where the better you get at it, the cheaper it gets. If you are a good advertiser in Google's terms, we'll talk about that as we go, but essentially if you have a high quality score, Google are saying to you, you are delivering my customers with what they came for. They're getting what they want, therefore you're good for me. And this was the genius part of the system, because by doing that they're able to say, well, I need to incentivize this behavior, Psych 101. Reinforce the behaviors that you want them to do. How am I going to do that? What have Google got to give us? Well, they can give us cheaper clicks. They can give us, therefore, cheaper conversions. They can show our ads more often. They can make life easier for us. Now, the flip side of that coin is that they can also go the other way. If you have low quality scores, you're going to end up paying a lot more for each click than you might otherwise need to. And this is where the stupidity tax comes in, or Perry has sort of coined that term of stupidity tax. I often refer to it as a bozo filter. Quality score, because there's two types of bozos. There's the accidental bozo, and there's the there's the on purpose bozo. So it stops people from running bait and switch ads, from putting up an ad that's going to get lots and lots of clicks that then is not going to deliver the promise of that ad on the landing page.
The malevolent bozo. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. And it's also going to stop that accidental bozo, the person that is just not a smart advertiser. They're trying, they haven't figured it out yet. It's a way of pushing those ads that are not delivering a great user experience, pushing them down and then off that first page. So the good stuff rises to the top automatically. And this really is the key to the whole system. Back in the day, you'll remember this from way back when it was GoTo, before it was even an Overture, before it became Yahoo. We could see, hang on one second, I'm just going to try and quieten down the office. We could see what everybody was bidding for all of their keywords. And it was really a game of she with the biggest wallet wins. If you wanted to show your ad higher on the page, you bid more than the person below you. And then they would be able to see what you were bidding. And then they'd raise their bids. And then we'd rate. And that's where all this automated bidding tools started, because therein were all the stupid games called bid jamming. And we'd move prices around, and it was ridiculous. That doesn't help anybody. And Google realized that it certainly doesn't help the users if the big boys with the biggest wallets, who probably are not the smartest advertisers and certainly not or not always offering the best user experience, Google doesn't want to show those ads at the top of the page. They want to show the ads that are giving the users the best experience. So how do they do that? Well, there's a bunch of different quality scores inside the system. We only get to see one. I'm going to call this the visible quality score. That's the number that, if you've been doing AdWords for a while, that's the one that you're familiar with. It's a number from 1 to 10, and it's given to every keyword in your account. Consider this a guide. It's an early warning system. Roughly speaking, this varies, but roughly speaking, 8, 9, or a 10, fantastic, you're doing a great job. Now, you should be seeing 8s, 9s, and 10s for your brand keywords. For your non-brand keywords, a 7 is good enough. If you're seeing 7s, you're doing okay. Don't obsess over trying to get a 7 to a 10. There's a diminishing returns here. You don't want to just spend all day obsessing over this one keyword. How do I get this one from a 7 to a 9? Good enough is good enough most of the time. Sure, you might be able to get some slightly cheaper clicks. You might be able to get your ads showing more often. Your impression share numbers will give you a guide to that. But it's probably good enough most of the time. There is a bit of a conspiracy theory that says that actually a 5 these days is good. It used to be a 7, and Google sort of lowered the bar. The conspiracy theory being that if we think everything should be a 7 and higher in the account, and they give us a whole bunch of 5s, then we spend a whole lot of time inside our AdWords accounts trying to fix those 5s and get them to the 7s, and therefore we have less time to go spend on Bing, Facebook, and everything else. Do with that conspiracy theory what you will. It varies industry to industry. There are even some keywords that will just be a 3 or a 4, and you'll never get them higher than that. Google is artificially saying, don't like this industry, don't like this keyword, don't think anybody's ever made any money from this, so we're going to discourage you from trying to show ads. And that's kind of the key point here, that they discourage you. Google never say you can't play the game. You just have to pay way more to play the game. So if you've got a quality score of a 1 or a 2, you might have to pay 20, 30 bucks a click in a market where you should be paying $1 or $2 or $3 a click. So a low quality score, much higher cost. And again, the guide part of this, if you've got a 1 or a 2, then you've got some problems, and then you need the checklist towards the end of this part of the presentation of what to go through and try and figure out what needs to be fixed in your account. And if it's a 3 or a 4, then you're starting to have some problems. You need to dig into those. You need to understand why you've got those 3 or 4s and what might need to happen to fix those. Does that all make sense? We are good.
That all makes sense. And
Okay.
I'm looking for some keywords where I can find examples.
Yeah, I'll show you exactly how to find that in a second, because one of the two most important numbers in your account for me, impression share numbers being the other, and the only two numbers that Google hide by default from you. So when you open up your new AdWords account, you don't actually see these numbers. But first, before we get there, two other quality scores. So there is a quality score for ad rank. So this is a number that Google use on the fly every single time you're eligible for an auction. Google then looks at all the stuff that's related to the auction, and I'll talk about some of the auction time factors. Like it looks at the actual search query. So remember, we said here that the visible score is a number from 1 to 10 that you see next to each keyword. I'll show you an example of that in a second. That's just a guide. Remember from when we talked about keywords in Module 2 that that keyword gets matched to a whole bunch of different search queries. And these days, even if that's an exact match keyword, unfortunately, but Google then needs to look at that actual search query in real time and make a quick decision about the relevance between that search query and that keyword that it's looking at. It also is going to look at the device being used, the location of that user, the language settings on their device, and certainly the time of day, time of week, and a bunch of other factors. I happen to know that once upon a time they even looked at the lunar phases of the moon to see if that was a factor that might influence behavior. They found the correlation was very low, so they threw that out as a factor. But they
now
look
that's
at,
funny, but good for them.
yeah, they look at a lot of stuff. Weather is almost certainly in there and one of those factors that they're considering. So all of that happens real time at the moment that that auction happens, and that's used to determine the ad rank. I'm going to show you where to go for a little bit more information about ad rank in a second, but essentially ad rank looks at quality score, this particular quality score, which is not a nice clean integer between 1 and 10. It's probably some huge long decimal number. It looks at a couple of other things like how much you're prepared to bid and how you're using ad extensions, and it uses all of that to determine which position you're going to show in for that particular auction. And then there's a third quality score, which is the quality score for the cost per click. And at this point then they factor in LPQ, which is landing page quality score. So then they, at this point, once they know which position you're in the auction, then they go have a look at some other factors to determine how much you're going to go pay for that actual click, should you get one. So quality score, therefore, impacts a large number of things. It is the whole game. The very first part of this is, are you even eligible to get into that auction? Once you're in the auction, once you're part of the mix, and Google's running that auction and trying to decide who's where, then it's going to determine your ad position and then how much you're actually going to pay for that click if you get one. It'll also determine those top of page and first page bid estimates that you'll see inside your account, and whether or not you're eligible to show ad extensions and the like. Yeah, some of those ad extensions will only show if you're in those top 3 positions. And sometimes there is a quality score threshold where even if you were to win that auction and be eligible for, let's say, position 1, just as a random example, your ad might still show just at the top of the right-hand side and not above the organic results, because to show in those premium positions for that particular auction, there's a quality score threshold. So it determines an awful lot of things. This is the game that we have to play. Now, it is worth pointing out, because it's a bit of a myth, that there is also a quality score for each ad group, somehow behind the scenes, and for each campaign. And that is definitively not the case. So if you pick up a keyword from one campaign and you move it into a new campaign, if it has identical targeting, same campaign settings, if it has the exact same text ad, because small changes in the ad will change what Google thinks about you and the quality score behind the scenes. But if it has the same ad, the same settings, and it's in the same account, then that quality score should be identical. Now, sometimes Google gets that wrong. Sometimes you've got to give it a bit of a nudge, and if all goes to shit, then you move it back into the campaign where it was before. But it doesn't always get it perfectly right, but that's the process. There is no campaign level quality score. There is certainly an account level where Google is looking at the history of the account. They're looking at the, well, I'll get to how it's calculated in a second, but the account level plays a part, but campaign and ad groups don't. Now, for a little bit more about the auction process itself, and if you want to dig in more into ad rank, then I'd highly recommend watching this 8-minute video. Hal Varian, as it says there, is still the chief economist of Google. This video was updated last year. There's an original one is from about 5 odd years ago, which was pretty famous when it happened. Well worth watching just to understand this in more detail. They walk through an example of 4 advertisers with different quality scores and different bids, and what everybody ends up paying, and then the result of the next step of that, what happens when bid changes or when quality score changes. So rather than rip off all of Hal's great stuff, go watch that video if you're interested. The Google shortcode for that video is at the top of the screen, or you can just go to YouTube and search for Hal Varian, and you'll find that plus a couple of quality score videos. So they're the different scores. There's only one visible score, and that's the one that is turned off by default. So it's only visible on the keyword tab. So you go to the keyword tab across the top, modify the columns, so pick the customized columns from the drop down, and then the attributes column, and then quality score. And we always mention this when we talk about this, they can't even write the entire word quality, they hide it by putting qual dot. I mean, that's because those extra 3 characters would have killed them. And you click add next to that, and you add that column to your column list over on the right hand side, at which point you then have a new column in your data, again only at the keyword level. And you're going to see a number there between 1 and 10, and if you hover over the little speech bubble under the status column next to where it says eligible, Google will display, give you a little bit more information and break down that quality score number into these 3 areas: the expected click-through rate, the ad relevance, and the landing page experience. Now, we're going to talk about each of those 3 sections in a minute.
Can I ask
yeah, go on.
Can I ask a conspiracy question? Why does Google make it that hard to find quality score? Why don't they just display it? Is it because it's a lot easier to get people to just bid more?
Probably, yeah.
I think it probably quality score.
I need to. I mean, I've certainly seen a number of those accounts. I was bidding for $5, and now Google says my first page bid estimate is $10, and obviously it highlights that stuff, you know, in bright shiny letters and puts lights around it. You know, below first page bid, you need to improve your first page bid. So people do blindly go in and go, okay, I'm going to bump this up to $10, and come back 2 weeks later and now I need to bid $14. I've seen accounts where people are spending $25 in a market where they should be spending $1, because Google has the authority, and they blindly say, this is what you need to bid. Oh, okay, Google, I'll bid that then. I suspect that also if they showed it by default, there's probably a huge swathe of advertisers that have really crappy quality scores, and if all these people saw these 2s and 3s and 4s, they'd probably become somewhat discouraged. It's probably just behavior 101, and they'd drop out and stop using AdWords.
Got it.
And go, I'm doing something wrong, I won't play that game. As opposed to, this is a more expensive game than I thought it was going to be. Okay, Google, I'll pay more. Because the smart advertisers, the ones that are paying less and less and less, who are probably driving the vast majority of conversions, they know about this, they know how to play the game, But even then, Google probably doesn't want to, by default, show them that, hey, you can get away with paying less if you want to. You can keep shaving down those bids if you want. We'll keep showing you in position 1. So yeah, I think it's just, I'm sure they've tested it at some point. I'm sure there's a bunch of data that went into that. And guys like Frederick Valles probably know the answer to that because he was on the quality score team.
I'm sure
but I'm
they
sure it comes down to making more money. Speaking of Fred Valles, you can use a tool like Optimizer, which is one of the few tools out there that charts quality score for you over time. Because it's a number that is only shown to you in the account in real time. So this 7 out of 10 here is the quality score for that particular keyword right now today. That might have been a 5 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 a week ago, but there's no way for you to know that. There's no way for you to change the date range in AdWords, go back in time and see what the quality score used to be. So if you do want to track that, and I should also mention at this point, which I was going to mention before, those 3 factors, expected click-through rate, relevance, and landing page experience, you're not able to pull that average or above average or below average amount, if you like, through the API. So there's no way of being able to dig into your account through some tool and saying, show me all of the keywords that have below average landing page experience. I think that'll be a wonderful advancement when that comes, but apparently it's not on the roadmap at this point. So, and I know a number of people have asked for it, us included. I think it'd be wonderful to be able to happen. Show me all of the keywords where I've got below average ad relevance, because then I can go to town and work on those first and fix my ads for those keywords. That doesn't happen yet. And you'll also, you'll see weird things here. You will see quality scores of 9 out of 10 where one of these is below average, and you'll see quality scores of 4 where everything is above average. So it is just a guide. It is not, again, don't obsess about it. It is just a guide. But being able to track quality score over time is a nice early warning system to run on your account. And Optimizer, again, I mentioned this last week, I think, but if you mention my name, you'll get a 10% discount. Just let them know that I sent you. Wonderful tool, does a whole bunch of stuff really, really well, to the point where we've pretty much retired most of our in-house tools that I've spent well over 100 grand building over the last 3-4 years. Optimizer does 90% of what our in-house tools do, and does it more beautifully, I have to say, in most instances. And they're very, very good at listening to feedback, and they're implementing new features all the time. We've got a very good relationship with them and have added a bunch of features to their roadmap. So I'm very excited to see what's coming down the track. But this is a great way.
Good for them.
And now this will only track from the date that you link your account to Optimizer. So if you go and buy Optimizer today and link your account to it, you can't go in and see quality score for the past 2 years. It starts on the day that you link your account, and you want to see a pie chart that looks a little bit like that, ideally, where most of your keywords are in the green. They're 7s and higher, and hopefully you got a few 10s in there as well. But great tool. You don't have to buy a tool. The ever brilliant Jeff Mardica wrote this script and shared it with me and some of my students in a different forum. But if you want a copy of Jeff's script, then grab that shortcode. That's the full script, which Jeff is happy to give away for free because he's awesome. We'll talk more about scripts in
again, the script allows you to do what again?
So this script allows you to not only calculate your quality score, and if I'm being really geeky, it's actually your impression-weighted quality score. So okay, let's dig into that. Well, okay, first thing, it calculates impression-weighted quality score and emails it to you on whatever frequency you set. So that might be daily or weekly or whatever. Sends you a daily email and says, this is your quality score across the whole account. So rather than you having to go into each individual keyword, it does some funky maths and rolls all of that up into one number, which gives you that sort of quick heads up, that quick KPI, key performance indicator, to say, yep, this is much the same as it was yesterday. I'm tracking okay. I haven't suddenly dropped from a 7.4 average to a 5.3. Whoa, okay, something major happened. But he's funky. He also has put a little chart, much like you see here on the optimizer one, directly into the script. The script creates the funky looking chart and emails you the picture as well as the number. I'm very visual. I like things like that. It's a very clever little script. An impression weighted quality score, just to touch on that. Let's say, extreme case, you had 2 keywords in your account, and keyword 1 has a quality score of 4, and keyword 2 has a quality score of 10. Now, the average of those two is 7. 4 plus 10 is 14, divided by 2 is 7. But let's assume that the 4, for a second, has 10,000 impressions for whatever time frame we're looking at. And the quality score 10 keyword only has 1 impression. Well, almost all the impressions were a quality score 4 impression. So your impression weighted quality score is 4.0001, something like that. That's far more important to Google than just the straight average. A straight average of 7 doesn't really tell you what's going on, but the impression weighted average says, what are the quality scores of all of those impressions? Sum them all up, divide, do a bit of funky math. It's not that hard. That gives you a much truer picture of that account. So for that account, you'd have an impression weighted quality score of 4 and a little bit, which is a much more accurate way to look at it than saying 7 is the average of those 2 numbers. So Jeff's script calculates that impression weighted quality score and shows you a little chart of where all of your keywords with impressions and how many you have with each number of quality scores. Great. Just add it into you literally cut and paste into your account. I'll show you more about scripts in module 8, exactly how to use that, but I know we've got a bunch of advanced people.
So this isn't something you stick on your page like JavaScript. This is a Google script, right?
Correct. Goes into the scripts area in the AdWords interface. So if that doesn't make any sense, ignore that shortcode. Don't worry about it. I'll make a mental note to share that again, and maybe we'll use that as the example when we get to module 8 and we dig into scripts in a bit more detail. So now that we understand what all the different scores are, why this is an important part of the game, and what your quality scores are, because you're starting to track them, or at least at the minimum turn on those columns. Now, how do they actually figure this out? So the 3 key areas, which we saw when we hovered over that little speech bubble, we saw the 3 key areas: historical, click-through rate, ad relevance, and landing page experience. So let's dig into these. Google looks at the click-through rate of that pair of that particular keyword with that particular ad. So it looks at the history of that keyword and ad pair over time. It looks at the history of your account as a whole, as I mentioned earlier, but not the ad group that this keyword's in and not the campaign that this group's in, but it does look at, it counts for a little bit the quality score of the account as a whole. Yeah, is this a good or a bad advertiser? A little trick here that we've used many times in the past. If it's a brand new account, which we don't work with very much these days, but if it's a whole brand new account, we'll launch the brand campaign first and let that run for a week or 2. Because your brand campaign should be getting click-through rates 20, 30, 40, maybe 50%. So very, very high. Depending on how well known the brand is, will determine how many impressions you're getting, obviously how many people are actually searching for that brand. With the guys we work with, that tends to be quite high. So you kick off a brand new account the way that Google wants to see those numbers. Very high impression share, because you're showing ads for everybody that's looking for you. Really, really high click-through rate. And so you get a nice big green tick in the column very early on of, Google thinks I'm pretty good. And then when you start to add in your other campaigns, we found it just gives them just a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. They just start off a little better than they probably otherwise would. I can't split test that. I can't give you definitive data on that, just gut feel, and from talking to other practitioners in the field, guys like Brad Geddes has also said the same thing. It just seems to help. You're playing the game Google wants you to play. It also looks at the historical click-through rate of the display URL. So most people never really think about display URL. I know we talked about them in Module 3 and the huge benefits of using that extra space after the /, assuming that you've got a short enough domain name. So a couple of tricks there. If you think that Google has incorrectly calculated the quality score, or you think that you need to give Google a bit of a nudge and have it recalculate quality score, maybe you've made some, we'll talk about landing page in a bit, but maybe you've made some changes to your landing page and you sort of want to force Google to reassess, change the display URL. Use a display URL that you've never used before. Google then has to go and have a bit of a think about it and go have a look. That's a sneaky trick. One thing you might want to experiment with, another sneaky trick, if you've got a display URL that you only use over in your brand campaign, then the history of that display URL is probably pretty bloody good. And you can chuck that display URL into a problem area. Now, if that's all you do, it'll just be a short-term fix, but that can start to get Google to go to rethink things and to help kickstart it into reassessing that area of your account, be that a campaign or a few ad groups. So think about display URL when you're thinking about quality score fixes. And then lastly, the historical click-through rate in that geography. So one of the easy ways that you can start to repair an account is to eliminate those areas, those geographies where you haven't performed well in the past, and that sends Google a very strong signal of, yep, okay, I'm only showing in good areas. Now, obviously with all of this, we have to balance, and we talked about this when we talked about ads, but we have to balance the game that Google wants us to play, which is click-through rate, essentially. And you boil all of this down, it pretty much boils down to click-through rate. We have to balance that with profit. We have to, on one hand, optimize for click-through rate, but we can't blindly only focus on click-through rate. Ultimately, we are all focused on profit, and we're not going to kill an ad that's a little bit worse click-through rate, but much, much more profitable. So you have to, it's a trade-off, but understand that the game that Google's playing, because click-through rate for Google at least is a cleaner way of comparing apples to apples, because everybody's conversion rates are different. This is the game that Google wants us to play, and therefore we need to understand it. I'll dig into these next two, and then we can maybe just pause and see if there's any questions here, because I might be starting to confuse one or two people. Right, ad relevance. This is a tricky one, really, because if you boil relevance down, like in terms of the only real way that Google has to measure this, it kind of comes back to click-through rate, right? If lots of people are clicking, then it must be highly relevant. What Google do not do, and again this is another myth with quality score, they do not do any semantic analysis of your ads. They do not look at the ad copy, in other words, and say, does this keyword actually exist in that ad copy? And that's why the Swiss Army knife ads can work. You don't have to have the keyword as the headline. It's a great rule of thumb when you're starting out and you're building your first few campaigns, but you don't have to have it there. You're not going to get marked down by not having that keyword in the headline, as long as people are still clicking your ad. I mean, if you write a Swiss Army ad and no one's clicking it, well, then you're going to have to change that fairly quickly. This is also, in terms of, you've got to think sort of big picture here, are people finding what they were intending to find? In other words, the way you're using that keyword, what's a good way to explain this? A big broad keyword, let's say someone searches for Chicago. That means a whole lot of different things to different people. Chicago hotels, however, makes a lot more sense. Like, you're pretty clear on what the majority of the people searching for that particular phrase are. And therefore, Google is much better able to determine, oh, yeah, okay, here's the search intent, and I know who to match to that. I know who's going to be relevant to that. it's very difficult to be relevant to something as big and broad as those single word terms, a term like Chicago that means lots and lots of different things to different people. You can still have those keywords. Again, you can still play the game. What Google is going to do is it's going to score that low because it hasn't seen much success on a keyword like that in the past. So it's the historical click-through rate of other people bidding on that same keyword, and it's going to say, I've never seen anybody make this work. You're welcome to have a crack, mate. Quality scores are 3, which means you need to pay a fair bit more than you otherwise would. If you can make it work, wonderful. We'll reduce what you need to spend. But right now, based on what I've seen in the past, this is the game. So think about relevance in terms of what was that search intent and how closely do you match that as an overall picture. I like to think in terms of majorities. What do the majority of people that are searching for that particular search term, what do the majority of people mean by that? Because many keywords will have lots and lots of ambiguous meanings.
Now, I will mention something about ad relevance and the semantic relationship of your keyword to the copy of your ad. Way back in that August of 2005 that we were talking about, literally the very first week that Google introduced quality score, I went in late one night and was doing experiment after experiment after experiment to try to crack the code on that. And discovered that you could get instantly lower bids. This was back in 2005. You could get instantly lower bids just by inserting the keyword into the headline of your ad. Not the ad copy, the headline of the ad. And I was absolutely tickled, and I was literally up till 3 a.m. running all these experiments. But I was tickled about it, and I sent it to Perry, and we called a teleseminar and broadcast this out to our list, and everyone thought I was a genius. So I was a hero for a week. It was great. But that was true in 2005. Nowadays, according to what you're saying, not the case. But once upon a time,
unfortunately,
they did. But once upon a time, it actually did work to just stick the keyword into the headline of your ad. But that notion has stuck around, and most advertisers,
yes,
reasonably smart advertisers, do actually do that. Some stupid advertisers do it too. But anyway,
there's no end of stupid stuff shared on stage. Brad was at SMX recently and shared a story with me, which I have to share on one of the most stupid things I've yet heard from someone up on stage who ought to know better. And they said, well, an ad group name, you can have up to 1,024 characters, so you should use as many of those as you can because that will show Google that you're more relevant. And they were teaching this, and this was 2014.
Oh, God.
It's just scary. Yeah, I said, give me the contact name of the event organizer, and let's make sure someone good speaks next year. Anyway, landing page experience. So this is another one of those little confusing areas. Essentially, Google want these 4 things. They want relevant and useful content on your landing pages. They want transparent and trustworthiness. They want easy navigation, and a new one that's been added relatively recently. They now state that they want to encourage people to spend time on the site. So relevant and useful content. Well, this is the screen grab from the Google page as of yesterday, so this is bang up to date. Make sure your landing page is directly relevant. So it doesn't actually say that you have to, again, you don't have to have the keyword in the URL, in the H1 tag, in the title tag behind the scenes on that page. Many people believe that helps. Again, I think it's one of those things that if you do the bulk of things right, that obsessing over those little details is a fool's errand. For the most part, landing page quality is binary. Then there's a couple of little bits to it, but for the most part, it's binary. So your page either passes or fails. When you're hovering over those little speech bubbles, way back when we looked at, once you've added that quality score column and you found all those 2s and 3s in your account, you hover over there. If it says landing page experience below average, then you want to come and check this stuff out and look at how can I improve my landing page. If that landing page experience is average or above average, don't worry about it. Landing page quality can really only hurt you. It can't help you. So if you've passed, no amount of obsessing and tweaking and changing URLs and sticking keywords in somewhere behind the scenes, none of that is going to make any difference. If you're currently a fail, then obviously you've got a bunch of changes to make in order to convince Google that you are actually okay and that it should give you a pass. So, right at the top, making sure your landing page is relevant. Again, relevance is vague on purpose. You don't have to keyword stuff it, and they've probably got lots of different ways of measuring that relevance, and there may be some semantic analysis going on there with the page. I know there's definitely not between the keyword and the ad text, but Google don't tell us any more information than that. Thanks, Google. Provide useful information on your page. Well, yeah, obviously. Try to offer useful features of content that are unique to your site. So, well, and this comes down in the transparency section as well. They want this useful information. They want you to add value without blocking that. I'm sure that's on here somewhere. The second one under transparency. If you request personal information, make it clear why you're asking for it. They don't want you to hide all the value behind opt-ins. Behind, like, I'm going to give you 14 videos that talk about this, this, and this if you give us your email address. That's the stuff that Google don't like. They want the user to be able to land on the site and get value from your site before having to opt in. If they choose to opt in for something, and always add a newsletter or something in there. They're not just opting in to get that one thing, because Google sort of see that as, well, you're forcing them to give personally identifiable information for something that you could have given away for free. Just chuck on there that you can send them a regular newsletter as well. And that sort of tends to satisfy Google, because now the what you're going to do with that personal information bit is now satisfied. Contact information. At a minimum, you've got to have a contact page, ideally with a physical address, ideally a phone number on there as well. We have a number of clients that don't want to show a phone number on that page. They don't want people calling them, but you're still making it easy for people to contact you, and that is easily found. Hopefully not too many people on this call have covered their pages in ads, but you can see there that you need to distinguish, which is massively ironic, I realize, distinguish sponsored links and ads from the rest of your site content. And they also don't want a huge proportion of the site to be taken up by advertising. Again, somewhat ironic. They want that value to be there. Openly share information about your business and clearly state what your business does. If your site gets reviewed by someone at Google who's probably in another country somewhere and probably not spending very long on that review, it's not like they're going to sit there for 30 minutes, trawl through every page and really think deeply about who you are and why you do what you do. They're going to give you a minute at best, and if they can't clearly and quickly and easily figure out essentially what the business model is, then that can lead to problems. So one of the best tricks there, one of the best ways around that, well, I mentioned that on the next page actually. Well, there you go, there's a little teaser. Hang around for the next page. And ease of navigation. So again, one of those myths. You don't have to have navigation above the fold, but you do need to have, well, you don't. It is advisable to have links into other areas of your site. You can get away with them generally by having those in the footer. Have a link to your homepage, have a link to your blog, have a link to your contact page and so on. You can generally get away with that in the footer. Every rep will tell you something different. We've got plenty of clients that can get away with maybe only one or two other links on their site. There are no fixed rules. So one of the hardest things in the world to teach, because everybody wants a definitive answer and it's impossible to give one. but these are the rules as stated by Google, and you can tell they are vague. Second from the bottom there, don't annoy customers with pop-ups or other features that interfere. So the main thing there, the other features that interfere, don't take over the function of the back button. If someone clicks the back button, they should be able to get back to the Google search results. And you shouldn't take over that function. And then yes, there are plenty of pop-ups and pop-unders and pop-overs and all sorts of stuff that you can code that maybe Google can't detect today, but I would just stay away from don't go and read the Warrior Forum posts on which particular thing that you can use and trick the system, and just it's much easier just to stay white hat. Just don't put any pop-ups on your landing page or exit pops. You can have them on other pages of the site that you're not using as a landing page if you really want, but Google don't want them there for a reason. Yes, I know from them as a marketing tool, they can work really well, but don't put them on your landing pages. So a couple of tips that Google don't say in those rules that we've found very useful. Privacy policy. We've talked about this a number of times. We'll talk about it more in Module 7 when we talk about remarketing. Absolutely essential to have that privacy policy. You may also want a disclaimer depending on the type of testimonials that you're using on your landing page. I can't really give you much more detail on that because I'm not a lawyer and it's different on every single case, but essentially you're saying that results may vary. Results are not typical. I think it was Frank Kern that when the FTC rules changed, went massively in the opposite direction with that and told it how it was. Most people that buy this course will use these CDs as beer coasters, and and really went the other way with that stuff and said this is what most people will actually do. But disclaimers are important. So one of the biggest ways to convince Google that the main purpose of your site is not collecting email addresses and personally identifiable information, have some paid products on your site. Make it easy for that reviewer to quickly and easily see that, oh, okay, I understand the business model here. They sell this stuff. Right, that's how they make money. They're not making money by spamming people. They're not only asking for email addresses, and I can't see anything on here that's a paid product. So it's fine to offer something in exchange for an email, as long as two things. The rest of the website delivers value without me having to opt in, and we've just found having at least one paid product on there somewhere just helps that reviewer understand what the business model might be, even if that's not your real business model. Doesn't matter. You can get past that stepping point. The other thing, obviously, we talked about them in week 3. Review all of the policy documentation. You can't have get rich quick type stuff. There's lots of policies around health and wellness. You never want to use the word cure, for instance. So there's lots of other policies that will be applicable to different people in different industries. Go read the policies for your country, and they do vary by country. And then one last one here, and then I'll get to another section so we can grab some questions. A couple of other things I wanted to mention around click-through rate. So when Google is determining click-through rate is normalized by position. So in other words, they understand that for a particular keyword, the click-through rate for position 1 might be, let's say, 20%, and the click-through rate in position 6 over on the right-hand side might be, let's use a round number for the sake of argument, 1%. They're not going to look at those two advertisers and say, oh, you're 20%, you're 1%, therefore I'm going to give you a really high quality score, and I'm going to give you, down in position 6, a really low quality score. No, that obviously wouldn't make sense. They normalize that by position. So they look at what click-through rate did Brian get when he was in position 6. We know he gets 20% in position 1, but what click-through rate? Because they're constantly shuffling ads around and trying different people in different spots. What click-through rate did you get when you're in position 6, and how does that compare to this guy over here who's in position 6 today? So normalized by position. They don't always get that right. So one way that you can get a bit of a quality score bump, if you find that your sort of position, let's say sort of 3.5, 4.5, you're bumping up against the top of that right rail. You're showing towards the top of that right-hand column of ads on the results page. You don't show in those top premium positions very often. sometimes you've got to kind of force Google to reconsider. So bumping up your bids and jumping up to position sort of 2-ish for a short amount of time, where we know that the click-through rate is much, much higher. We know that because you've used your segment, your top versus other segment inside AdWords, and you've seen for yourself with your own data the difference in your click-through rate when you show over on the top positions versus when you show over on the side. Google seems to take into account when you fall down from those top positions over onto the right-hand side. It seems to figure that bit out pretty well. But when you're trying to work your way up the right-hand side and break into those premium positions, it doesn't always get the maths right. So sometimes you just need to elbow your way in, force Google to reconsider. So you bump your bids up, in the short term, force your way into those spots and say, hey Google, look, see when I'm in these spots, see how good my click-through rate is? Bump my quality score up, please. Now, if you're going to do that, obviously use a tool like Optimizer or Jeff's script to monitor your quality score and make sure you don't continue paying that higher price over time. A couple of other notes here. They only look at the click-through rate on Google search, not on search partners, to determine that quality score. So they're basically looking for the cleanest data that they can get, because obviously all of those partner sites are all quite different. You know, Amazon is very, very different to AOL, for instance, totally different style of ad. So they don't use your search partners click-through rate to determine your quality score. They're only looking at what happens on Google, and they're only looking at the exact match of your keyword to the search query. So even if you have a broad match keyword in your account, they're looking at the click-through rate when someone searches for exactly that search term. Yes, there's loads of other search terms that are being matched to that broad keyword, but it's ignoring those. Now, it's using those come auction time. Remember, we had 3 different quality scores. We had our visible quality score, then we had our quality score for ad rank. So it's taking, when it looks at the ad rank, then it's taking into account that actual search term. Hopefully I haven't lost you, stick with me. But it's using to determine the visible quality score. It's only looking at when that keyword exactly matches the search query. Again, clean data. You can imagine a broad keyword might have 2,000 search queries that it's matched to over the past couple of months. That's going to mess up Google's system. So it wants nice, clean data. It wants to keep things nice and simple as much as possible. So it says, well, what was the click-through rate on the exact match only on Google search when it was in this particular position? So it's going to normalize that. So that's just a couple of the more geeky side, but good to understand. Any questions before I dig into the last couple of bits here for quality?
First off, a comment about what making it clear in your landing page what you sell. I think the urban legends talk about the young beat reporter or investigative reporter back in the early 2000s who went into Enron and kept interviewing people and asking them, so how does Enron make their money? And she kept not getting clear answers, and they were long, they were complicated, and they were abstruse, and she kept asking and kept asking and kept not getting clear answers. It really helps your website when people can land on it and see clearly, oh, this is how they make their money. They sell these products. Good enough. So comment there. Let's see about pop-ups.
Just on that fact, design for humans first. Don't design for the Google system. Correct. That helps because it helps conversion. It helps people build trust with you. We said that trustworthiness is a factor here. So yeah, always design for humans first and worry about algorithms much, much later. Sorry.
Yes, next question from David. He asks, what about Qualaroo and exit pops on landing pages to find out if they found what they wanted? Does Google have an issue with those, specifically when they're for market research?
That's a very good question, given that I think Avanash is a big part of Qualaroo. I'm going to guess not, given that Google keep trying to push me through bloody surveys every time I call them at the end of the, can you just hang on the line and tell me how good I was? They're obviously a fan of those in the real world. Don't
they
know.
are, aren't they?
don't know is the honest answer. I tend to stay away from any kind of pop-up for my landing pages, for the main site as a whole. So, I mean, you certainly shouldn't be sending traffic to the homepage. So you're probably going to have a bunch of traffic exiting from the homepage. Put it there first. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't risk it. I would certainly start off without it. Maybe then chuck it in for a month. Keep a close eye on your quality scores. Problem with us is we're never able just to sit there and not change anything else for that month and see what kind of impact something like that has. We're always making changes, daily, weekly changes to an account. We're never just not touching it. So I wouldn't even be able to test that if I wanted to.
Right.
Don't know. Suspect it's probably okay. There's probably a few that Google recognise. I mean, they're pretty smart. I think there are 37,000 people, most of them with PhDs working there, and they're pretty good at this stuff. So they've probably worked out who the good exit pop type providers are, and they probably have someone reading the Warrior Forum and keeping up with all of the, here's a cool new thing that gets you around the thing that,
Right.
all of that stuff. All that Warrior Forum crap, they sit and watch, and they take notes, and they go, oh, this is interesting. People, look, they're all doing that. Certainly, like on an SEO side, they've been doing this for years. Oh, look at all these people using that blog network over there. Let's let them go for a little bit. Let's let them go. Let's let them go a little bit more. Bang.
Right.
And you wake up one morning and 30,000 people have been booted out. So they're onto it. It's not even worth trying to be a little bit black hat. Just stay white hat. That's a white hat product. I don't think you'd have any problems, and if you did, you'd certainly have someone come back to say, well, what was the problem here? This is what we're trying to do with it. But I'd take the cautious approach with that stuff, and I'd add it to areas of my site that I'm not using for AdWords first.
Right. Let's see. Next question. Do you need to have the address and the phone number on the landing page, or is it sufficient to have it on a contact page? My answer is I'm always going to, on perrymarshall.com, if you go to the home page down at the bottom, there is a name and there's an address and phone number there. But Mike, anything you want to say about requiring that on a home page?
I think the requirement is that they are a click or two away from contact information. So as long as you've got the link to the contact page on the landing page, good enough. But again, come back to the human point of view, the trustworthiness point of view. I suspect you're probably going to have better conversions if you appear as a real business and you reduce the risk for those real people making that consideration of should they buy. Whether that's buy something free, i.e. opt in for something, or buy a real product. Why would you hide that? I can't think of a good reason why showing that, obviously don't put the phone number there if you don't want a whole bunch of phone calls, but having an address there showing people that you're not some fly-by-night thing, that you are a real business, that has to help you.
Good. Let's see. I'm going to paraphrase Greg's question. Mike, are there instances where Web Savvy, when working on accounts, sends traffic to people's home pages? Are there any instances of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what's a
brand
good
campaigns
rule of thumb?
in particular?
Okay.
Brand campaign, someone's looking for that big brand by name, we're probably going to send that to the homepage. We might test other pages over time, but homepage is probably good enough for that. That's where they're going to get sent if they click on the organic result.
Okay.
But most of the time for my non-brand stuff, people are telling me the thing that they're after. So sending them to the most relevant page for that particular search is obviously going to get you better quality score and better results in terms of profit. But yeah, brand would be the main thing. Non-brand, I can't think of too many cases where we'd send non-brand to the homepage, unless obviously it was a tiny site, which is rare for us to work with those anymore, unless they have awful landing pages and we're in the process of building out additional landers. That might be a case. Some of our display stuff, some of that more general display stuff might potentially go to our homepage, but again, most of the time there would be sending it to a deeper page within the site. So Rule of thumb, brand campaign, not much else.
Good enough. And one last request. Can you show again the screenshot that shows how a person navigates to get Google to show you your quality score inside your account?
Oh, of course. Yeah. So
there we go.
Go to the keyword tab, go to the column drop down. Of course, you'll get a copy of these slides afterwards, but you probably want to turn that on right now and see what your quality scores are. You're hanging to know. The columns drop down. Underneath that, you click on the thing that says Customize Columns. Find the Attributes metric. Now that quality score won't be there if you weren't on the keyword tab. If you're on a different tab to begin with, and quality score won't be there, and you'll notice it's getting further and further and further down this list as they keep adding more and more attributes to this list. You click on the blue Add Link. That adds it to the list of columns on the right-hand side. I always pick it up and drag it to the top of that list because I think it's one of the most important numbers in your account, which means that you don't have to keep scrolling all the way over to the right-hand side to see your quality score. You see it front and center right next to the keyword itself.
Perfect.
Right. Weighted factors. Now, this is pretty much a copy of the pie chart that Hal Varian shows in his presentation, which was first published about 5, possibly even 6 years ago. They haven't updated this to my knowledge. This is not an exact science. It is just to reiterate that click-through rate is by far the most important part of the formula. And for me, if you boil ad relevance down, I think there's a big chunk of ad relevance that falls into click-through rate as well. Landing page experience, yes, it matters. And then there's these other factors. So Google always, when they talk about this, anywhere that this is printed in the Help Center, they always talk about other factors, which allows them, we talked right at the beginning about how this is the secret sauce. I didn't focus on that a lot when I was on that slide, but mates rates, bozo filter, and secret sauce, it allows them to change the formula at will without having to tell us about it. And the best analogy I've heard for this is, it's like, imagine if you got your mortgage bill every month from your bank and they said your bill this month is based mainly on the amount of money that you owe us for the house, but also how tidy your yard was when we had Jim drive past the other day and have a look, the color of your roof, and some other factors which change from time to time, and therefore your mortgage this month is $5,000, not the $4,000 you were expecting. Thanks very much. It allows them to change the rules at a moment's notice and not tell us why, and it directly impacts how much you need to pay. So yes, it's a bit unfair, but get over it. It's Google's game.
Those evil robber barons.
Damn them for making all this money for us. Yeah, making it the best advertising thing in the history of advertising things. We have to play their rules sometimes. Right, quick checklist for you. Again, you'll get these slides so you don't have to madly scribble these 10 things down. I would work through these in this order if I were you. First thing to do, check your landing page quality. Is that landing page quality, that landing page experience, below average? If it is, then go back to the landing page experience page and work through Google's guidelines there. If you have a Google rep, ask your rep to take a look at the page and ask them specifically what they think you need to change. Site speed is becoming more and more important, particularly with the rise of mobiles. There's a bunch of tools that you can use to test that. If you use Google Chrome, then they've actually got a little site speed thing built into developer tools, but ask your developer about that. Make sure you start. I've seen loads of case studies where even a 2-second increase in average page load has not only improved quality scores, but more importantly, improved conversion rates and improved profit. Site speed is important. Check the relevance. So in other words, have a look at your pages through fresh eyes and think through that chain of relevance from the search query to the keyword to the ad copy to the page itself. Does it make sense to you? So forget all of the ins and outs of the algorithm for a second. Just does it make sense? As always, we're always focused on the 80-20 around here. Is it worth the effort? You know, yes, the keyword's got a quality score of 3, but it's tucked away in a corner of the account over here that gets an impression a week. Don't worry about it. Focus on those highest impression keywords first. Focus on where the money is going first. One of the best ways that you can improve your quality score is to review the structure of your account. So breaking big ad groups into smaller ad groups. Essentially, peel and stick. We've been talking about it for years and years. That improves the relevance, because if you've got an ad group with 500 keywords in there, it's near impossible for all of those to be the most relevant they could be when you have one ad showing to those 500 different keywords. So breaking that keyword list down into smaller and smaller groups, changing the structure, is going to generally improve things. Write better ads. I know it's kind of obvious, but click-through rate again is a massive, massive part of the formula. So test big changes. Try keyword stuffing. Go the opposite direction of Swiss Army and getting very clever with it. Now, Swiss Army is fantastic for giving you positive constraints and a huge checklist of different things to try. But if you're suffering, go the opposite direction and keyword stuff your ad. Like, take that keyword, put it in the headline, get it somewhere in D1 or D2, get a part of it in the URL. It's going to make that ad stand out more to the user. Add a bunch of ad extensions, make that ad bigger and stand out more, like the 0 ad I showed in Module 3 with a 7-line ad. That ad is getting a high click-through rate just because of the fact that it's really noticeable on the page. It takes up a big chunk of space. Review your search query report. That's what SQ stands for, search query. If you're using, hopefully no one is now using broad match keywords. We've changed all of those to modified broad at least. You might be, if you're being a bit more conservative, you might be using phrase or even just exact match keywords. But if you're using broad or modified broad keywords, then review the search queries that that keyword is getting matched to. Always do that. Always be looking for new negatives and new ideas in that report. One of the best ways to improve your click-through rate is to add more negative keywords, particularly for broad and modified broad keywords. Like I said, sometimes you just need to increase those bids and give Google a bit of a kick and improve the position, get into those top positions, and show Google that actually your click-through rate is a lot better than it thinks. Yes, it's meant to be normalized per position. Yes, you shouldn't have to do that, but time and time again, that has worked. Change the display URL. If you change it to something that Google's never seen before, you're going to force it to reconsider and to dive in and recalculate quality score, and review your geo report. So that's in your dimensions tab. Go find those geographies where you do have particularly low click-through rates. Again, if it's 2 impressions a month, then don't worry about it. But sorted by impressions rather than cost, where do I get lots of impressions and have a horrible click-through rate? Am I showing ads in places that aren't relevant? Exclude those geos. That's going to help things as well. And I did not think that that would all take over an hour. So we'll do some shopping stuff.
And one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stick this in the chat box. There's an old article I've always liked. It's called The Conversion Trinity. It's by Brian Eisenberg, and it explains 3 things that will improve any ad and any landing page and keep people there longer. So I'll put that in the chat box. So onward.
Lovely.
Shopping
relevance and value. Very important. Shopping ads. We've all seen these now. So I'm old enough to remember Frugal back in 2008. That went away, and Google had PLAs, we called them for a long time. I still do, product listing ads, and that has all been replaced now by Google Shopping ads. So this is a fully paid program now. If you don't sell physical products, then you can tune out, jump off the call. If you're running this for clients, then you'll want to understand this. I'm not going to go super deep into this because I suspect that it's probably 20% or less of us on here. I want to give you enough to get started, understand the game and how it's played. We can always talk another time. And I happen to know that there might be some more advanced training on this coming in Planet Perry later in the year. So this is more of an overview than a really specific nitty-gritty detail. Now, this is what we're talking about. And you'll see sometimes these ads top left, sometimes there'll be 5, sometimes there'll be a 6, 8, 4. It changes depending on the product and Google's whim at the time, basically. And this is what you need. You need your e-commerce site. And then sitting between that and your Google AdWords account, you need a Google Merchant Center account. Apologies for the Australian spelling of center. You then link these together. So you push the feed. I'm going to talk a lot about data feed in a second, but you push a data feed, a list essentially of all of the products that you sell, the related images, the prices, the shipping weights, and all of that information. You push all of that into the Merchant Center. The Merchant Center is a halfway house for your data. It's where Google collates all of that data, cleans it up, and makes sure that it's in a format that it recognizes before then pushing that data across into Google AdWords, which is where you're going to have your Google Shopping campaign. We talked about campaigns last module a couple of weeks ago, so I won't talk about that part of it too much here. This is more of the how do all the pieces fit together. Now, for bonus points, you might want to use a feed management tool, and I'll show you one that we use a little later. And that's just a way of being able to change or to improve that data feed without having to alter all of the data directly in your site, which then might obviously change the name of products, say, on your site. You don't want to make changes that are going to be reflected across the whole site. You just want to change the data that you push into Merchant Center. So I'll talk about the feed management tool that we use in a little bit. But that's the general picture, just so you get it clear in your head. Data feed out of the back end of your site, Shopify, Magento, whatever that might be, into your Google Merchant Center, GMC, I'll call that as we go through, and then you push the GMC, you link the GMC to your AdWords account and run your shopping campaign or campaigns there. Worth noting that if you are doing this as an agency, you can now have a multi-user GMC, so essentially like an MCC account for the Merchant Center. I think you still have to ask your Google rep to set this up for you. There were a few emails back and forth trying to get us sorted on this, whenever that was, 6 months, a year ago. But very, very helpful, because now I have all of my client accounts all listed. My multi all have their own logins into this, and so it just makes life much easier to have all of that in one place. You're not having to use different names and passwords every time you try and log into a client GMC. So 4 things that we're going to go through here. The data feed itself, the structure of how you set up your campaigns, your shopping campaigns inside of AdWords, and then bidding and optimization of those campaigns. The data feed is the most important bit. First things first, read the Google specs. They're different in every country, so I'm going to give you this link again. I've made sure that all of the links don't contain 1s and 0s and I's and O's, so that they're easy. You can jot this down, or you can wait until you grab a copy of the slides in either the Perry Marshall members area, or these will be added to the Google Plus community, where we're having some very interesting ongoing discussions. So thank you everybody for joining in and asking questions and answering questions and helping out over there. Some excellent stuff happening there. These will all get posted there tomorrow. So go to this page, choose your country or where you're going to start your first Google Shopping campaign. You need a feed for each country, and you can't have one feed that covers a whole stack of countries. So if you're selling in the US and Canada, you're going to need 2 feeds there, and the rules are different in every country, so I can't run through all of those. Go read through those for yourself. 2 main types of feed. They're either going to be automatic or manual. And you need to set up, part of the feed is to understand Google's taxonomy. I'll come back to the automatic and manual, don't worry. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of both. But understanding how Google categorizes all of these products. So it's very similar if you cast your mind back. Oh, actually, I haven't copied that. Yeah, have we? In Display Bootcamp, we covered a lot of this. In Module 7, I'll cover this. I've touched on, to date, in this course, in-market and affinity categories. Very, very similar to those. There's big long drop downs. You can grab them on this page. I recommend you download that Excel spreadsheet and crawl through there until you find the ones that make sense for you. So you need to use one of Google's product categories. That's important. Understand their taxonomy. It is complicated. I didn't count the number of rows in that spreadsheet when I downloaded it the other day. I'm going to guess there's a decent 2,000, but it's way simpler than Amazon's. So if you're thinking about doing some Amazon stuff down the track, trying to get your feed into Amazon is a freaking nightmare. So Google makes it pretty easy by comparison. And this is how you do it. You go into your Google merchant feed. So you're going into GMC, you're going to the middle part of the map that we looked at before, and you're pulling a feed from somewhere else. So you're going into GMC first, go to the feeds section, and then the big red add data feed button. Some basic information there, so you're basically just giving your feed a name and telling it that target country. Actually worth pointing out at the top there for mode, the first time you do this, stick it in test mode. You don't want things to go wrong, and for Google to push your feed live, find all these errors. You don't fix the errors in time, and then Google starts suspending your account. Not a good look. So start in test mode, pick your country, give it a name, hit continue. And this is where you get to choose. So really it comes down to how often your data is going to change, or maybe how much of a pain it is to pull it out of your system. We've worked with clients that have an e-commerce site, but it was built in 2007. It's got band-aids on top of band-aids on top of band-aids. They can't get their heads around throwing the whole thing away and starting again, but it doesn't have any kind of data feed coming out of it because the whole thing's been built manually in HTML. If that's the case, then you're going to use something like this top option. Or if you've got a relatively low number of products, let's say sub 1,000, you're not going to use spreadsheets if you've got 100,000 products. I'm going to assume that most of us on this call don't have hundreds of thousands of products. Otherwise, you'd probably be already doing a whole lot of Google shopping. Then you can use Google Spreadsheets. So Google Spreadsheets is for stuff that doesn't change too often, or stuff that's super complicated and you're just going to grab, like for that example I showed before, yeah, they had a couple of thousand SKUs. We just grabbed the top 50, stuck them in a spreadsheet because it was going to be too hard or impossible to pull the data from the back end of that site. Put all of that data in a spreadsheet, and then we hand the Google spreadsheet to GMC. And we say, if we choose that option, we then say, all right, Google, make life easy for me. Can you create the template Google Doc for me? So it'll create all of the headings across the top of that Google spreadsheet. Then you can go there and fill in all of the data. Yes, it's a manual process to do that, but sometimes that's the only option. If you've got a client, they've only got 5 products, and those products rarely change. You know, they add one new line a year. Then chucking all those into a Google Sheet might take you a couple of hours, but then you're done. And you'll notice at the bottom there, create an upload schedule. Even if the products, hot tip, even if the products don't change, upload that feed from your Google Sheet daily. Google likes daily. Google likes stuff that's done often, because again, it comes down to relevance. If the feed that has been refreshed yesterday versus the feed that hasn't been refreshed for 15 months, which one of those is more likely to be relevant? It's going to give preference to the one that's just been uploaded, the one that's just been refreshed. So even if it hasn't changed, upload it regularly. But make sure, this is critical, make sure that the data that you have in here matches what is actually happening on your site. Google really, really doesn't like it when the price in your Google spreadsheet is $19.99 and the price over on the website is $29.99. That's when it's going to start suspending your campaigns and potentially your entire account. Now, the automatic method, if you use something like Shopify, then here's a great plugin for you. You'll find this inside the App Store within Shopify, and it's actually just called Google Shopping. Dead easy. You grab it, it's a free app. Your Shopify developer will bolt it all up together for you. Install that plugin, and then this time when you come into the upload method, you pick the other option, the automatic option, and basically you just in here, the middle of the screen, feed URL, you insert into here the URL that the Shopify plugin gives you. Now, lots of people have got lots of different types of stores. I'm sure we've got some Magento people on here, but Shopify seems to be the platform of choice these days for the majority of smaller and medium retailers. So that's the one I'm going to use as my example. I can't cover every single platform. If you have something other than Shopify, go talk to your developer, please. Don't stick a question in the Google Plus forum for that, because I'm not an expert in those other platforms and I won't have a clue. So talk to your developer, the person that put your site together, and say, I need to get a feed out of here of all of my products. I need to get it into Google Merchant Center. Here's the rules. Tell me what I need to do. Done. And this is the tool that I was mentioning before. So we use a tool now called Data Feed Watch. There are many others. I'm just flicking back through my notes here. Somebody gave me another one the other day that I didn't put in the presentation. Genius. Can I find the notes really quickly? Single Feed, I believe it was called. Single Feed is another option. We use Data Feed Watch. The benefit here, so why would we use this tool? We use this tool to rewrite the data that comes out of the feed, but to do it in a dynamic way. What do I mean by that? Well, if I were to dump all of the data feed from the back end of the client side, assuming this is someone that does change their products fairly regularly, and I were to dump all of that data into a Google Doc, say, and they've got awful title tags. Title tags of your products are one of the single biggest elements of what's going to affect how often your ads even show on the Google search results page. So title tags are a really important thing. And let's just say they've got awful title tags. We could dump all of that data into a Google Sheet and you could manually rewrite all of those title tags. The problem, obviously, is the next time that you pull all of the data out of the back end of the site and stick it into that Google Sheet, you're going to overwrite all of those changes that you've just made. Data Feed Watch allows you to create rules to do those rewrites. So in other words, you can say, okay, for product number 1003, rewrite the title to be this. Or for all title tags that contain the letters WTC, because someone's used some weird, stupid abbreviation, rewrite that to be men's watches. And so for all of those titles, it's looking through all of those, finding that little thing that you want to rewrite, you want to improve, you want to enhance, and rewrite that based on a whole bunch of rules. And that means that when you pull in the data feed, maybe it's the next day or the next week, all of the data gets overwritten, but then all of the rules run before the data gets pushed into Google Merchant Center. And so now you're pushing in cleaner, better data into the Google Merchant Center. It's been really, really good on the sites that we have needed this. It's dramatically improved our impression share and our overall number of impressions that we get for our shopping campaigns. So one of the best ways I've found to do what it does, what it says on the tin, data feed optimization, to improve, to optimize that feed before you push it into Google Merchant Center, so it sits in between your store and Google. All right, campaign structure. So this changed quite a bit last year when Google upgraded to the new Google Shopping. Their aim is to make this a more retail-centric. So in other words, the way you organize your products is more like a retail store. When you create your new shopping campaign, we covered how to do that last week, then by default you have one ad group in it, and it's going to be called All Products. The power comes when you start to slice and dice this product group into smaller and smaller product groups so that you can bid them differently. Now you can have multiple ad groups if you want, but to begin with, when you're doing this the first time round, my advice would be stick with one ad group. I've seen a number of people try and create different ad groups and they rarely get it perfect and they end up with confusing data and overlaps. So one ad group, but then you slice and dice that all products group that lives within that. And the first thing you have to do is to choose which attribute of your data you're going to base this slicing and dicing on. There are 6. This will be a little bit clearer as we go through. You can slice and dice by category. So that is essentially the Google taxonomy that we looked at before. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. If you sell a whole bunch of products that are all different brands, so let's say you got Nike shoes and Reebok shoes and Asics, then you might want to build out different product groups based on the brands of the products you sell. If it's your own stuff that you're selling, then a lot of times people will only have one brand, and therefore that's not going to be a sensible thing to use. My preference, unless I've got more than, say, 1,000 SKUs, my preference is item ID. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then you've also got these other 3 at the bottom, which you're rarely going to use, especially for your first half a dozen shopping campaigns. When you get Super Shopping Ninja, you might want to use those, so let's ignore those for now. This is what it looks like. Inside, let's go back to that picture there. So you click on all products, and then you have the option to subdivide all products by the 6 things that I just mentioned. Now, in this example, if I were to choose category, you can see that the top level category here is clothing and accessories. So because all of the products in this feed are all in the one category, it's really not very useful for me to subdivide by category. And then I go the next level down and they're all jewelry, and then I go the next level down and they're all watches in this particular case. To have 15,000 products that are all in one category, not very useful. You can keep subdividing and subdividing and subdividing, but we've got to use our smarts here. I think the best way, the vast majority of times, is if you subdivide by item ID. This is the equivalent of building, if you think about it this way, it's building one keyword ad groups. By subdividing by ID, what you're going to have, if you subdivide by item ID, you press the big plus button at the top here, and it adds all of those item IDs from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side. And now your product group inside your shopping campaign looks like this. I've got a line for each product ID. Why do I want that? It relates directly to the next topic of bidding, because we bid by product group. And obviously, same as we do with our ad groups, same as we do with our keywords, we want to bid differently based on the profit that those are making us. So I find it much easier if I have this sort of data to look at, where the 2 products that I'm showing there in green are much, much cheaper CPA because they've got a much higher conversion rate. Those are obviously much, much better for me, particularly the top row. 10% of all of my sales come from this one product line, and so I'm going to want to bid that much higher. Now, if I've tried some other funky way of dividing my product and saying all the red ones are over here and all the green ones are over here, or Nike are over here and Reebok are over here, obviously this is difficult to do. If you've got 10,000 SKUs, you're going to have all these rows to trawl through. But for most of us, with let's say 1,000 SKUs or less, I find this the easiest way to be able to sort this like I've done here, sort by converted clicks. Follow the money. Where am I making most of my sales? Which ones are much cheaper than the average? Again, just like everything else we do in AdWords, we're looking for the outliers. I want to bid those up, and then the one in red there, the really expensive sale, I want to wind down my bid on that. Maybe I end up actually excluding that product and saying to Google, you know what, forget about it. Just pretend I don't sell this. I don't want to show this ad anymore. And the benefit of this way of doing it by item ID, you can exclude individual products if they turn out to be costing you too much to sell. So there are many, many, many ways you can do this. There are probably lots of different ways that are perfect for you. I just find this one of the easiest ways to get up and running with Google Shopping quickly, and we're running pretty big accounts using this method. It works really well for us. There's also, I mentioned Optimizer before, there's also a shopping bid tool inside Optimizer that will help you with some of this. But you know by now that I like a very granular setup with Google AdWords. We tend to have one keyword per ad group. For me, this is the equivalent of that. Super granular, therefore I get all of the data that I want, which gives me more control, I'm a control freak, I like control. Which brings us to the optimization of all of that. Keywords are important. So keywords don't exist inside your shopping campaign. If you look on the top half of the screen, you don't have any keywords for this ad group because we don't use keywords, we use the data feed. But negative keywords still matter. Most people miss this. Most people have 0 negative keywords in their shopping campaigns. So I would add stuff like this. Now this one was for the watches one that I mentioned to you before. So stuff like parts and servicing, we don't want to show ads. Now Google probably won't show your ads if people are searching for, you know, a watch part or whatever that might be, servicing of leather watches. But why take the risk? We know that negative keywords are a great way to fix an awful lot of accounts and campaigns. Same applies to shopping. If I'm selling new products only, then I'll have my standard list of second-hand, used, vintage, and so on. And free, well, we always chuck free in there. Why not? Reporting for this, so obviously pretty key to your ongoing optimization. It's our good old friend, the Dimensions tab. So you can see the search terms, and that's one of the great reasons to even use a shopping campaign. Which search terms are triggering my ads to show? Well, that gives me potentially great information of keywords that I need to have over in my non-brand search campaigns. Or I might find stuff like this and just take it from me that these two terms have nothing to do with the product that this retailer sells. So it's finding new negative keywords for me, just as we do with our regular campaigns, even though these are actually selling. And for this particular retailer, those CPAs are not too shabby, but I don't want to take that risk. It's just really odd to me that they're even showing ads, knowing what this retailer sells. Really odd to me that they're even showing ads for these. I'm going to clean up my account, clean up the data. Those are a little bit too expensive, so I'm going to add those as negative keywords. Also added in the recent update to Google Shopping at the end of last year was all of this benchmark data. So 4 columns here that we're looking at in the middle of the screen at the bottom: benchmark CTR and benchmark max CPC, and then the search impression share and your lost impression share due to rank. So benchmark CTR, first of all, you can see for this industry, for people that also sell these products, usually you're getting about a 0.5% click-through rate. This particular campaign over on the right-hand side, we're getting 2%. Awesome, we know we're doing well. Most people are paying around about $1.60, $1.70. We're paying around $2, so we're paying a little bit more than average, but that's okay. It's in the same ballpark. We're getting 4 times as many clicks. And that's probably why our impression share is so high. It's rare to see an impression share as high as 88% for a shopping campaign. I'm very happy when I see a number like that. Also, within Dimensions, they've recently added this, which is pretty funky, where I can dig into Dimensions, go down to the shopping section, and I click on my View drop-down, and then again, we have the same elements there that we had on our original list. Again, I like to choose item ID, which gives me this data in just a slightly different format, and I can look through across all of my items now, because maybe I have got a bit funky and I've put different items in different product groups. This is another way that you can see your data very, very cleanly, and again, see which products are working very well for you, which ones aren't, take action accordingly. So, action steps for today. Go turn on quality score columns. Go install Jeff's script if you want some bonus points. Go start using Optimizer, wonderful tool. Mention my name, get 10% off, all good. And start to track your quality scores. If you've got landing page experience below average, do some work on your landing page. If it's average or above average, don't worry about that. Move on to something else. Generally, focus on improving your click-through rate. So focus on negative keywords and writing better ads. To more deeply understand the auction and the topic of ad rank, go watch that Hal Varian video that I linked to, and he's also got a couple of others there around quality score, also quite short, 7 or 8 minutes, worth watching if you're doing this for a living. Some good stuff in there. Phew, an hour and a half this week. That was pretty good. Next week, we'll talk about Google Analytics and all the different types of conversion tracking that you now have available, which is a lot of stuff to fly through. Loads of slides coming for you next week. We will chat then. Now, I'm sure there are a few or many shopping questions.
Indeed. First question, Liam asks, is there an alternative to data feed watch? What was it? If there is one.
I've got to flick back through my notes now. There are many. Single feed. You might even type into Google alternative to data feed watch.
There you go.
Single feed. Single feed comes recommended too from a mate that I know does a lot of shopping campaigns.
Okay. Good. Let's see. John asks, our click-through rate in Google-only search campaigns is in the 15 to 20% range. With Google partners, it's 2 to 4%. With our shopping campaign, it's around 1 to 2%. Is this something I should be concerned about? After he asked that, one of the things I thought of was those negative keywords that you pointed out. So I'm sure if that, if he hasn't already explored negative keywords, that's certainly one thing. Needs to make sure he checks off the list first. Any other recommendations?
Benchmark CTR. Let's go have a look at what the benchmark CTR is for those products for your industry. Yep, review your search query report and look at which negatives you can have. And obviously, many of the search queries that are junk don't show up in your search query report, right? Google doesn't give us information for the search queries with 0 clicks. So then you have to sort of start thinking a little bit outside the square, maybe use the Google keyword tool as we did right in the beginning, module 2, go search for your products and trawl through that list looking for negative ideas. So remember, it's not just looking for those exact terms and go, oh, yeah, that's definitely a negative. When you find a negative, think laterally. So I showed you before used. So when I think used, I'm thinking, oh, what's another way of saying that, right? Second hand or vintage, second hand with a space in maybe. And there's probably a whole bunch of others that you can think of immediately as well. So use those different ideas, add those negative keywords, that will probably help. But benchmark's going to give you a very quick indication of how well you're doing. Also look at your impression share and see because if that's 60-70% or higher, then you don't have too much to be worrying about. If that's below 10%, then you're missing out on a huge amount of traffic.
All right, Andrew asks, what determines the position you appear in Google Shopping? Is there a quality score in Google Shopping?
I suspect so. I don't know that for sure. There isn't a visible quality score. There is bound to be some sort of quality score behind the scenes.
If we know anything about Google.
Yeah, there is an algorithm there somewhere.
Yeah.
Bid, obviously, is a big determinant. Click-through rate is a big determinant. So it's going to be a similar sort of basic quality score. So assume yes, and assume that click-through rate matters. Position, don't know, because you don't see that data. They don't, because the example I showed had 8 PLAs. Sometimes you'll see 6, sometimes there's 4 or 5 or even 6 in a row. I guess that's why they don't report it, because there's so many different formats, and they change seemingly at Google's whim, depending on the particular search query, depending on the geography, depending on the search volume for that particular keyword. But yeah, there is bound to be a quality score. Is the short answer to that question.
So a more general question about quality score, just in Google search, for example, not necessarily shopping. When does Google first give you a quality score? In other words, can I check, as Greg asked, can I check quality scores if my campaigns haven't started running yet and they're paused?
Very good question. Probably should have covered that. Thank you, Greg. When you add a new keyword and when you add that ad group into your account, Google immediately gives you a predictive quality score. As you start to accrue data, Google will change that quality score to more of an actual quality score based on your results. So to begin with, it's going to be based more around what Google knows about that keyword and how that has behaved in the past. So when I talked about the example of Chicago, Google knows that very, very few advertisers over the past 13 years have been able to get any kind of sensible click-through rate on such a general term, i.e. not able to convince a large group of people this is what you were looking for, and therefore I'm just going to score that one pretty low. And then over time, if you are able to get a massive click-through rate, Google says, happy days, walk with me, come spend some money over here. There isn't an exact number there, but I can give you a sort of a rough rule of thumb that sort of once you get your impressions into the hundreds, then depending on your results, you're going to start seeing some changes.
Frank has a question. He says, I use Google Shopping to get traffic to my e-commerce store of 900 products. If I subdivide the store by item ID, am I to understand that I'll then have 900 item IDs?
Well, you do anyway, Frank. You already have 900 item IDs because you have an item ID for every product in your feed.
There you go.
So you already have those. You just have them maybe lumped together into different product groups at the moment. Possibly just the one default of all product groups, which doesn't allow you to bid differently by product.
Okay. He goes on. Also, how do you know the profit margin on a particular product unless you set up a custom label field?
All right, so Frank's a bit more advanced. Good work. Yes, I absolutely use those custom labels. Knock yourself out. That's wonderful. I'm not going to cover all of that stuff today because that is a more advanced use of shopping, and I don't want to overly confuse. This is the 80-20, remember, our DIS formula. But yes, that's fabulous. If you're doing that, then you can group products together based on profit margin. You can then bid accordingly. One of the lovely things about the new version of Google Shopping is that I can actually see what product that product ID relates to directly from inside the feed. I don't have to keep going back and referring to Merchant Center, which we used to have to do all the time. So, but yeah, that's fabulous. Frank, you know what you're doing. Knock yourself out. You're going the right way. Keep going. Get off the call, man. Go too far.
It's a good day when Mike Rhodes is telling you, knock yourself out, mate. So excellent. Good. Those appear to be the questions. So Mike covered lots of material here. Quality score really matters. I have always liked Hal Varian's presentation of how AdRank works. It makes real sense. It's simple. It's not rocket science. It's like 5th or 6th grade arithmetic at the worst. So
yes.
at least
nice round numbers.
Yeah.
He makes it as easy as he can. And that AdRank one has been updated last year, which takes into account ad extensions and so on. So there's just a couple of little tweaks there. Well worth watching here. He explains things very, very well.
And by the way, a question came in from Joshua, and it's kind of a funny, I don't know if anything pops to mind. He says, can you share your favorite landing page example? I've looked at a lot of landing pages in the last 48 hours.
Narrow that down by, let's say, industry. No, go search. I'd say just go do a Google search for that. Go look at what other people in your industry are doing. Go use a spy tool like SpyFu or SEMrush and look at who the big players are in your industry and look at what they're doing. And even then, there's no such thing as best practice, really, because everything's different for different people in different markets. The best landing page is what makes you the most money, really.
Yeah. And again, I will point out, I left this in the chat box, the link to Brian Eisenberg's Conversion Trinity article, which is one of the first things I usually send people to, when they have questions about what's a good landing page setup that tends to work. So, I'd follow your advice too, Mike, which is go search on Google and look at all the different landing pages.
Build your own swipe file.
Yeah, make your own swipe file and do kind of a gut check. Do I feel compelled to do whatever this particular page is asking me to do? The keyword is feel compelled. So yeah, good. Anything else, Mike? Before we wrap up?
I am good.
Good. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the Google Plus community. Thank you, Mike. We will see you next week.
Thank you, sir. See ya.
Bye now.